On this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, clinical professional counselor, sport and mental performance consultant Patrice Whitfield shares her personal story about coping with perfectionism. She uses her expertise, experience, and coping strategies to help her clients at Nurture Therapy in Chicago, as well as the WNBA's Chicago Sky. This will be a good episode. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up? Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on the east side of our great capital city, Madison, Wisconsin. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at tdecora8791, as well as hitting me up on Facebook at Tim Decora. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to the show. Leave me a comment if you liked what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would like to tell their story, love to tell their story, email me at tdecora@gmail.com. Glad you could join us today wherever you happen to be. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think, stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring the mind. A new episode will be released on Monday and Thursday morning featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional setback, divorce, success despite challenges, etc. Our guests will share how they learn to survive and thrive. According to the internet, and the internet is always right, correct, Patrice? Yep. There's a nod. Okay. Perfectionism is a common personality trait that's not an official medical diagnosis, but more in that ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder category, maybe under that umbrella. It's characterized by having extremely high standards and expectations and feeling like nothing you do is good enough. Perfectionism can affect people of all ages and can lead to unhappiness, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, self-harm, difficulty relaxing, difficulty sharing thoughts and feelings, interference with personal relationships, education, and work. Today, I welcome Patrice Whitfield to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. Patrice is a licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois and a sport and mental performance consultant. Through her clinical work, consultations, and board memberships, she empowers individuals, athletes, and organizations to align overall well-being with peak performance. After her earning her undergraduate degree from Baylor University in Waco, Texas, in psychology, Patrice received her master's from Adler University in Chicago in counseling with a specialization in sport and health psychology. She currently works as a psychotherapist at Nurture Therapy in Chicago and serves as the Director of Mental Health and Performance for the WNBA's Chicago Sky. I'm so glad you could join us today. Patrice Whitfield, welcome to the show. What is up?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hello. This is so cool. I've had a few, what I would say, kind of star power people in my basements before, more in my old house before, but this is something new. I think you might be the first person with some connection to national champions and the WNBA. So cool. How was your winter break?
It was good. We spent some time in Indianapolis. We spent some time in Florida. So I got cold and I got hot, got rainy, and excited to be back in Madison.
Was Santa Claus good to you? Do you still
believe? He was. Well, I think that the people that love me, including Santa Claus, treated me very well this Christmas.
It was a good year. So yeah, we had a good year, and we talked a little bit off air that I had 13 or 14 people down here. And yeah, that's just a good time of year where we can rekindle old relationships, friendships. In this case, we don't get to see all of our loved ones all the time, but it was a good time. So one of the things I noticed is you are a student manager for the Baylor women's basketball team. And we talked a little bit about that. National champions in 2012, 40-0. What was that like?
Oh, it was awesome. That was my sophomore year, so my second year being a manager for the team. And it was just so cool to see us achieve that through the ups and downs of the season. It was just one of those experiences I will never forget.
Pardon me for saying this, but 40-0 has ups and downs.
Hey, I mean, to make a championship team, even you can't just look at the wins and losses. There's things that contribute to those successes, and there's adversities. And so it's just awesome to see us be able to get over those adversities to continue to win.
Yeah, I mean, 40-0 it doesn't happen very often, but I do remember some of the players on that team. Let's talk about Coach Mulkey. What kind of person was she to work for? She's got to be pretty demanding. We probably know that. I see her face when she gets a little angry with the officials and gets intense. But instead of talking about that, let's talk about, other than her clothing, did she still wear those kinds of clothes that she wore with LSU?
Yep, bright and super colorful.
Like, hey, I'm here. Mm-hmm. So what were some cool things about her that maybe the rest of the world wouldn't know, other than her clothing and being an intense coach? What would you say are her couple of cool things that you got to experience with her?
Yeah, I would say she is exactly what you think she is, what you see on the court. She's passionate. She is fired up all of the time. And so what y'all see on TV is what you see behind the scenes. But she has a thing that she would say to the managers, that if you can work for me, you can work for anyone. And I don't know, 10, 15 years later, I still believe that is true, that the lessons I learned as a student manager carry with me into my career.
Yeah, I mean, you would probably have to be, just by virtue of just being there in osmosis, you're going to get some really cool things. But I imagine you being who you are, you're learning from the best, and that had to be cool to have her on your resume as a reference.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, there's the passion, there's the fiery spirit, but we were taught excellence. We were taught to handle things right, to handle things, to be anticipating people's needs. And so beyond just being a manager, but I think being a manager at Baylor really set me up to know how to work hard, to know how to take care of people, to anticipate people's needs, and just do a really good job.
I know when I coached, it was on the lower ranks, but with our football program and the high school I worked at, we won a large number of games and some state titles, but I was a freshman coach, and the people that I have built relationships back then and even to this day are the managers, because they show up before the players get there, and oftentimes they're there way after, and then they take care of us, and we kind of took care of them, and we just said, hey, you're going to respect the managers as much, if not more, than the coaches, because they're here before you and they're here after you, and they're just here for you. So I know exactly how important managers are. One person I think I can't go without asking about is Brittany Griner. I mentioned off air that my daughter and her graduated from high school the same year, 2009. I would be remiss if I didn't ask about Brittany. What kind of person was she? I know she was a great basketball player. I think everyone in the world knows that. But what kind of person was she?
She was so fun. So she was a year older than me, so I got about 3 seasons with her, and she is a big goofball, life at the party, likes to crack jokes, and just likes to have fun. So I think that when basketball wasn't an action, she was just focusing on just enjoying her time. You would often see her like on her skateboard or some sort of board where she would just roll through campus, and you imagine she's so tall, so she could be seen like just kind of going through her board to class, and so she really enjoyed just having a good time.
Coach Mulkey, I don't know if you're listening to this, but I don't know if I would have had Brittany Griner riding around on a skateboard, so props to Coach Mulkey for allowing that, or maybe she didn't know. Also now, I do have to ask, did you get a ring?
I did. I got a ring every year. We won the Big 12 conference and tournament champions, I think every year, almost every year I was there. So got a ring for that. And then, of course, our national championship ring my sophomore year.
Now, if I would have been thinking when I sent you an email this morning, I said, can you bring your ring?
I'll have to send you a picture. But that was one thing that Kim Mulkey was so good for with the managers and just anyone who worked for the team, is that she wanted to make sure that anything that the players were receiving, we received as well. So I definitely have all of my rings sitting in my office now.
That is so cool. I've heard coaches do that, and my coach was the same way, that if the players are eating steak, the managers are eating steak, and so coach, my college coach. So we do have something in common. In 1991, we won the national championship, Division III at University of Wisconsin Platteville, and you're a national champ too. So
there we go.
Yes, there we go. Adler University in Chicago. I do want to chit-chat about that. What was well, first of all, I had never heard of Adler University, but I'm sure there's hundreds of universities I haven't heard of before, but right here in the backyard, Chicago, what was the lure there?
Yeah, so whenever I applied there, I believe it was called Adler, the Professional School of Psychology, like the Professional School of Psychology. And so it is a graduate school only, just focusing on psychology degrees and counseling degrees. And so when I was looking for a graduate school, I knew that I wanted to focus in on sports psych, but I also wanted to have a clinical background as well. And this is one of the few programs in the country that allowed me to be trained in both. And I also wanted to move to Chicago. I had gone to Chicago my junior year of high school for a class trip and just fell in love with the city. I thought I was going to move there and have this like really fun like life where I was just like a busybody and was going to school and starting my career. So was really excited to get to Chicago. And even after my interview, which was in February, I still decided to come here.
Yeah, we talked again off air. You'll hear me you'll hear me say that a lot where we talked off air, but I had asked, have you seen snow before? Do you know what Chicago is like? The windy city, the snow that comes off the lake effect snow. So interesting. But so mental health was something that you were thinking about. So I'm going to get into my promo here. Our sponsor, Buck and Honey's Restaurants, is dedicated to mental health of their employees. They have a mental health professional on speed dial should any staff member need help. Buck and Honey's has been impacting the communities of Sun Prairie, Monona, Wanakee, and Mount Horeb with their great food, drink menu, 5-star customer service, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere. People keep coming back with 4 locations in Dane County. One is close by. And we already talked about this, but you have been to Buck and Honey's.
I have. I've been to the Sun Prairie location. I think that's the closest one to me.
Yeah, that is the home office, and they have such a huge menu. I know we again talked earlier about the pizza, which I've been eating, Bomber Special. So next time you make it, do you like pizza?
It's not my favorite.
It's not your
but
favorite.
I will say, when we went to Buck and Honey's, we took my wife's parents, and her dad is known to be a little picky, and he walked away enjoying it. So I would say it's a good choice.
Or the firecracker shrimp is really good too.
Oh, I do love that.
Yes. So, okay. So segment 1, again, with the recovery world and whatever it happens to be, there's anybody that shares their story usually follows in this kind of format of what was it like, what happened, and then what is it like now. So we're going to address a couple of those in the beginning. So Patrice grew up in Arlington, Texas. I don't know many Texas people, so I'm checking off a box that you're in there. What was your family like? You're a twin, and then you mentioned that you have an older sister. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about your parents, and then we'll go down the family tree.
Cool. Yeah, I grew up in Arlington, which is about 20 minutes outside of Dallas, 20 minutes outside of Fort Worth, so kind of smack dab in the middle. And my parents had my older sister, and about 4 years later decided that they wanted to try to have one more, and we're blessed with twins. And my brother and I are about 50 minutes apart.
Oh, really?
My mom's labor actually stopped after I was born. I was born first, and then stopped for 50 minutes, and then he came along almost an hour later.
Wow, that's kind of crazy that usually it's one and then
it's like
other.
Bing, bang, yep.
Bing, bang. But how often do you have to remind your brother that you are the oldest?
I did a lot when we were little, but I grew to about 5'2", and he grew to 6'4". So it doesn't really have the same weight as it did as a kid, as it does as an adult. He is much bigger and taller than I am.
Well, he just needed a little more cooking. You were ready to go.
Right.
And you came out. So, Arlington, Texas. You must be are you a Rangers fan or?
Yeah, Rangers fan, Dallas Cowboys, Mavericks.
Mavericks, yeah. So in school, you were in the gifted and talented programs is what I'm used to hearing, where I used to teach, but you mentioned classrooms. When did that start with maybe being pulled out or elevated to a different table in the room or with different groups of kids? How did that look when you were a youngster?
Yeah, I think it was in some of the lower grades, third grade, third, fourth, kind of the rest of elementary school. And after the teachers took a look at the different students in the grade, they started separating kids into specific classes. And so once we got to be about fourth and fifth, we actually started being in those classes and moving to the different teachers as a way to just have an elevated educational experience. And they didn't call it gifted and talented when I was in elementary school, but we know what it was. I think they gave it like animal names, like
animal names.
the cougars
you're in the tiger group.
Right, exactly. But now knowing who was all in there, we knew what was going on.
Again, with the high school where I was at, sometimes you were in all aspects, or sometimes you would be in that, again, gifted and talented for comm arts, which is English, or math, or science, or social studies. Was there a specific one that you were really strong at, or was it all of them?
In elementary school, I believe I was fine at all of them. I think as we headed into middle school and then in high school, math was just not my strongest suit. I stuck more to English and history and was really good at that. But those funneled into taking those AP classes in high school.
Yes. Were you one of the lucky few that you might have been in seventh grade, but you were taking classes with the eighth graders or eighth grade and then they had to ship you off to the high school?
No, but what they did is since we had those specialized groupings, that whole group would then take an elevated class. So in eighth grade, I took high school courses, but it was all my classmates.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with that. I don't have any personal experience with that, but I wish I would have. But so you also dropped a couple of things in the bio when you sent this to me. I would like you to just kind of explain because I would like to know. So you said being a black girl growing up in America, bought into black excellence and exceptionalism. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that when I was a kid, it was as a way to kind of show that, black people were smart and capable and get to these advanced careers. It was taught from a young age that we needed to be good. We needed to work hard. We needed to be twice as good. Being a young girl, we didn't have the opportunity to make as many mistakes as maybe our counterparts were, or that we needed to have better behavior. We needed to make sure that we were passing the tests and doing really well and getting really high scores because one, we weren't going to be given many chances. And so feeling that pressure of I need to get this right away, but also too that you have to work hard, even harder than some of counterparts to get what you want. So, and then once you were able to do that, it was very much praised. That speaks to the exceptionalism of if you're doing well, if you're smart, if you're taking those quizzes, if you are being elevated to those gifted and talented programs, then that's praised. That is something to highlight. That is something to show. That is something to on Facebook. If you're my parents or aunts, it is something to highlight because that is what is going to get you to those elevated careers, that to be able to just make the kind of money and create the kind of lifestyles that we weren't maybe given in previous generations.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I think it needs to be explained sometimes because, and to hear it from you is perfect. I'm glad we touched on that because people need to hear that. Hard work, praise, work harder, wanting to stand out. Was there a certain? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but because of the attention, notoriety, resume building.
Being a twin, I just feel like comparisons began kind of from birth. Like how we talked about how like who's first or who's the tallest or who's the this. It just naturally, and I don't think that it's to anybody's fault, but it was just naturally there is to walk first, who learned to read first, who learned how to do their multiplications first, things like that. So it really, to me, it felt like the harder I worked, the more praise and more attention that I got. So it felt like, okay, I like that. I like the feeling of getting attention and praise and feeling like I was separate from classmates or separate from my siblings. And so then I wanted to work harder. So this, from a really young age, it started to where the harder you worked, the more praise that you got, the more attention you got. So then you kept going, and it just kind of reinforced itself. Gifted and talented programs throughout sports, throughout my family, of trying really hard to get the attention that you want.
Yeah, and you probably know this from all of the brain and how the chemicals work, and you're probably getting that big, huge boost of dopamine at some place that said, okay, if I do this really well and I spell this word correctly or do this math problem right, I'm going to get praise. And then all of a sudden that was kind of snowballed and kept going, and you were getting those dopamine hits in the academic area. I wish I got that. So in high school, besides the academic part, where you were really, did you play sports?
I did play sports. I did it all. So I played sports. I played the cello in the orchestra. I was in a few leadership programs. So this is kind of where you start to learn, like, you're just going to go, because you're going to do all of these things. You're getting praised, or you're feeling like you're doing good. You're a busybody. And I really think this is where some of this started to build, is like the more I did and the more I did it well, the better I felt about myself, the better I felt as though adults are me. So definitely was very involved in sports, are obviously football and basketball, but I played a little bit of volleyball, played soccer, played basketball. But then as I got older into high school, started focusing on just even more extracurriculars as well.
Trying to get that well-roundedness for maybe kind of that resume building for college applications, and you were setting yourself up for that, which is, we try to sell that, and I'm sure your school is no different, where in order to get into the college you want to go to, you're going to have to do all these things and look really well on your application. So after high school, off you went to Baylor University, the home of the Bears, Waco, Texas. What was the pull there?
Sure. So I'm a person who, whenever I see something and I know that that's it for me, I will name it. So I would say, I don't know, my freshman or sophomore year of high school, drove past Baylor and was like, that's where I'm going. It's beautiful. It's close to home. Like, that just feels like where I need to be. And it was also a school that wasn't very popular where I grew up. A lot of people went to the bigger schools, went to Texas, went to Texas A&M, went to University of North Texas, these really big schools. I like to stand out. I like to do a little bit different. So I knew that I wanted to go to Baylor. But then once I started doing my research and took a few visits, what was really nice about that school is that they had the big sports, which I really liked, being a part of the Big 12 conference. They played all of the big schools, but when you actually got into the classroom, they were small classes. And so I didn't feel overwhelmed when I was on campus. Waco is a pretty moderate city, kind of like Madison. So it wasn't a city when you walked in where you felt like, oh my gosh, this is huge. And so it just felt really comfortable. It felt like a really good fit for me professionally, like academically, but also personally, and knowing that this was going to be my first way away from home.
We already talked about the sports. I mean, that probably fed into that as well, that you're not only doing the academic stuff and I'm imagine probably really well, but then you're also, you're with the Baylor women's basketball team. I mean, they're, national champion your sophomore year, and you're around a Hall of Fame coach, and you're around an All-American basketball players, because there was a couple other ones. Mm-hmm. So you were just around star-studded, high-level things, and that probably again kept you thinking, I gotta achieve this wherever I go or whatever I happen to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, when you're around excellence from a young age, from 18, 19, 20, and you're seeing excellence every day, every game, every year, it's just something that you grow accustomed to. It becomes normalized for you. You think, this is how life should be. This is what performance is based on. Also during that time, I really started to observe the difficulties that some of the athletes were experiencing, not just in basketball, but in all of the sports. So really started to feel that pull towards sports psychology, counseling, clinical things, and focusing on mental health.
So we talked about this where you started to think that maybe I maybe need to get some help, or there's something that is bothering me and I don't really know what it is yet. So after college, you're off to grad school, and we talked about the pull of Adler University. You talked about it's a graduate school only. It's in Chicago. I mean, who wouldn't want to be down near Michigan Avenue and Lakeshore Drive and all those good things that go on in Chicago? Again, I'd like to fast forward because this will set up segment 2 as when did you decide that you might need to start to get some help? When did you know that it was time? What were the concerns from others?
During my college experience, I definitely started to feel more anxious, had moments of depression, just feeling more sad. I think just I struggle with lifestyle changes. I struggle with like major life decisions and things like that. I enjoyed my 3 years of college, and then heading into my senior year, just started to feel that pressure of what do I want to do in my career? What's next? And just really started to stress. And going into the winter and the spring semester of my senior year, I started seeing a therapist on campus. One, because I knew that this was the kind of work that I wanted to do. So I wanted to experience what it would be like to be on the other side of the couch, but also wanted to really start exploring some of this anxiety that I was having. And what was interesting about that time, and it's even today as an adult, I internalize a lot. And so I wouldn't necessarily share some of the stressors or the experiences that were happening to me. I was just kind of sitting with it, and which only makes your anxiety worse, and if you're not really expressing it or getting it out. And so during that time, I definitely struggled with being vulnerable. I didn't know how to talk to friends about what I was going through or talk to advisors or anything like that. I just kind of sat with it. And I think, unfortunately, that only exacerbated things and made things worse. But I definitely did start to realize around that time, 21, 22 years old, that I probably should, there's something up. Like, this is impacting me to where I am starting to see some more physical signs of anxiety, like difficulty breathing, or like my heart beating fast, or just getting really hot whenever it was time to perform, whether that was on a test or I had to take the GRE, like preparing for grad school, things like that. Yeah.
And how I looked at my own situations with anxiety and then panic, I had to, in that recovery part, I had to get into where did this all start. You kind of talked a little bit about it off air, that your parents had the code of silence like a lot of parents do, and a lot of people that are that age from when they were kids, is that we don't talk about certain things. We don't talk about our feelings or how we're doing, or we're a little uncomfortable sharing those. And it sounds like you might have been doing a little bit of that when you were in college, and then trying to suppress these things of, well, I'm just going to internalize it, and then it leads to other things. And as you know, being in the counseling and the therapy field, you know that it's good to talk about how we're feeling and get those things out that might be bothering us, so that when other things come in, they have places to go. For me, if something was bothering me, it would come in and it had nowhere to go, and then it created chaos, where I started getting rid of some of the things that bothered me in my head, got them out, and now when bad stuff comes in, it has somewhere to go, and I can control. So that's going to lead us into segment 2. So Buck and Honeys has been with the Survive and Thrive 8791 since episode 1, with 4 locations in Madison. There's always one near. Some people ask me why Buck and Honeys. Well, they have a great menu, 5-star customer service, and there's nothing like going out to eat to make you feel better. In segment 2, you are going to talk us through what life was like for Patrice Whitfield and what it was like to suffer from perfectionism. Please stay tuned. Don't change that dial, because you don't want to miss segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. We will be right back.
If you, a loved one, or someone you know is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help and resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365, and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Emergency crisis services, dial 911. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, dial 988. To connect via web, chat visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to say 3 words. I need help. Now, back to the show.
We are back. Welcome back to segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Tim DeCora. The podcast is where we feature guests who share their story in hopes of helping others who may be struggling with what life throws at them. In 2014, Patrice Whitfield decided to get some help with what she might perceive as something being wrong or going through some physical symptoms of anxiety, and then ultimately her being perfect, wanting to be perfect at everything she did. So powered by some influential mindsets that contributed to her perfectionisms, they were comparisons, be twice as good at everything, praised for overachieving, kind of the mentality of what's next, and then we're all performing at something. Those were some of the things that drove or fueled her perfectionism. Can you touch on a couple of those?
Yeah, I think, for me, I always say that I'm a recovering perfectionist because I'm probably always going to be one. And anytime that I feel like I have got it under lock, something else happens and I feel like I have to go back and get some more help, or I have to start doing some more self-reflection. We talked a lot about those comparisons from when I was a kid of feeling like I hated being compared to my brother. I hated being compared to other classmates and wanting to stand out. I thought that if I was going to be compared to other people, that I needed to be the one that won. I needed to be the one that stood out. And that was also fueled by that feeling that I know a lot of kids that come from people of color backgrounds, who have parents who maybe worked really hard to put their kids in a position of success. We were often told to be twice as good to get half as much. And so I felt like even if I did do well and got into a good school or got an A on a test, I needed to keep going, because if I wanted to have the success, or if I wanted to feel comfortable, then I would need to keep going. There wasn't really stopping. And I think that is what I could really understand, this stop comparing yourself. We hear all of the time, no one's perfect. It's okay if you make mistakes. I could logically understand that. But then as I was going through life and as I was beginning my career, I'm realizing that truly what was fueling my perfectionism is this idea of that I needed to be continuously going and performing. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't help that I was learning how to teach others how to perform and how to be at their best. And within the sports world, you're often told to get over humps, or to get over a bad play, or to get over a loss is to kind of think, what's next? I don't want to focus on this turnover. I don't want to focus on this bad loss if I think about what's next. And I often remember telling athletes that too, like, you turn the ball over, you missed a shot, think what's next, and then get on to the next thing. And while that might be helpful during sports and during a game, and to get on to the next play, what was unfortunate for me is that I was using that mentality in my life. And so starting to feel as though I was performing all of the time. And so in a basketball game or a football game, there's a clear end, and you take off your jersey, you hang up your shoes, and you're done. But when we're in life, it can feel as though we're always performing all of the time. And so that we feel like we're always on. And I took that on. I like literally maybe 6 months ago, I was telling clients as they were coming into my practice, hey, I believe that we're all performing at something. And so I'm here to help you be at your best. That is something that I routinely say. But what's unfortunate about that is that while we may be performing at work, while we may be performing in our relationships, while we may be an athlete and are performing literally on the court, in the field, or wherever, there has to be an off switch. And so I didn't feel as though I had that off switch. And so that always on feeling was really driving the boat in my perfectionism.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of really good things, that off switch. I think there's a lot of people that their off switch is broken and it's always
Yeah.
it's always on. And how do I get this to turn off? And you're going to talk about that in a little bit of how you can turn that off, or some of those mindsets that can help people get through some of the things that they're starting to feel. And so that led to some of the symptoms, and you've already kind of addressed some of them, but I'm going to go through some of the things that you were feeling so that the listeners, if there's some people listening out there, they can say, well, I have that, I have that, and I have that. Maybe I should address this. And whether it's perfectionism, whether it's just straight up anxiety or some depression, what do I do? And you've already talked about that. You went and got some help on campus your senior year and continued to do that afterwards. So some of the symptoms you went through were some anxiety, procrastination, depression, difficulty trying new things. We've talked about comparison to the others, dips in the self-esteem. Let's talk about maybe the procrastination.
Yeah, if you've ever had a big moment in life, whether it was needing to apply for a new job, starting that business, even asking that person out, we have feelings that come up immediately when we think about starting those things. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's excitement, maybe it's nervousness. But for me, I felt like when it was time to do something big, I would feel anxious. And when I felt anxious, I would procrastinate. How many of us have had a test and we procrastinate studying because we really don't want to study, but also because the test is something that brings up some emotions in us. And so when we procrastinate, what it does is it temporarily decreases some of that anxiety, and we think, oh, we're all good, we're all fine. Like, look, I don't have to worry about it anymore. But what happens is that anxiety comes back like 10 times stronger because we have that little break where our anxiety dips, but it's going to come back up. It's a cycle. And so some of that procrastinating behavior is maybe fueled by some emotions that we haven't really dealt with. That leads to that difficulty trying new things, right?
Yes, yep.
Is that if you are procrastinating and knowing that this is going to be really hard for me, I might fail, I might make a mistake, I might look stupid, I might embarrass myself. We don't really want to try new things. We're like, I'm just going to stick to what I know, the rivers and lakes that I'm used to, because I don't want to try anything new, because then I'm going to embarrass myself. And that makes me feel anxious thinking about embarrassing myself or making a mistake. And so I'm just not going to try anything new. And that can lead us to feeling really stuck. And then from a basketball performance standpoint, right, that maybe we don't take the shot when the clock is winding down. We don't want to be the one with the balls in our hands. But then because we're anxious and we don't know what to do, we turn the ball over and then we lose the game anyway. Definitely some dips in self-esteem and how you feel about yourself because of all of that.
So I'm taking a look at here the first thing you had written down and the third thing, because those are some of those mental health kind of disorder things. You talked about the anxiety a little bit, where you said, your heart would be beating in your chest, or you would start to get warm when you got into these situations, the elevated blood pressure or heart rate, maybe not be able to catch your breath. Talk about the depression a little bit. Where did that factor in?
As I was explaining, if there's procrastination or anxiety or difficulty trying new things, you may feel really stuck, right? You want this new life, or you want to try something new, or you want this success, but you don't feel as though you're able to do anything about it. So you start to feel really stuck. And for me, when I feel stuck, it really decreases my mood. I feel like it's all there's that self-loathing. It's all my fault. Like if I could just try new things, if I could just be better, if I could just be stronger, if I could just be better at what I was trying to do, then I wouldn't be feeling this way. And so you feel stuck, and then kind of maybe comes in some of that shame or some of that, the self-loathing or dips in self-esteem, and it meets you in that stuck feeling. And now you are experiencing just some depressive symptoms. Absolutely.
I totally, as you were talking about some of those things, I have gone through those as well. Probably more on the anxiety part. I would assume that if I would have gotten tested for depression, there would have probably been some of that in there. So when you started talking about that, I'm checking off the mental boxes. Yep, that was me. Yep, that was me. Yep, that was me. So anybody out there who is experiencing that, wanting to be perfect or thinking you need to be perfect all the time and having your on switch broken and being in the on position all the time, here are some recommendations that Patrice uses, or she would recommend, Or she might even tell some of her patients this, that to address her perfectionism mentality, this has helped her survive maybe in the beginning. And like anything, like basketball or sports, you're not going to shoot free throws at 90% right away. You're going to have to do some practice. And so you probably had to practice these things. So I'm going to go through these 5 things quick, and then I'm going to circle back and say, hey, touch on this and this. So You talked about the first one being adaptability versus rigidity. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. And then trusted feedback. Number 3 was imagery and visualization. Number 4 is there something you want to do, need to do, forced to go, do. And then number 5 is environments where you get to turn off that switch. And I can't wait to get to that one, but let's go through that first one, adaptability versus rigidity.
Research shows that it's better for us to have emotional adaptability, and those are the people that have a higher emotional adaptability are actually able to perform at higher levels. So these are the people that are able to accept changes, accept when things don't go our way, accept when there's mistakes that are happening, and are able to adjust quicker. Versus being rigid and thinking everything has to go exactly this way. And if it doesn't go this way, it's all messed up. It's a big problem. I'm giving up. I'm not going to start anymore. I'm just never going to do this again. And I like to use the example of, depending on the title, you name it, for this building, either the Sears Tower or the Willis Tower. So a few years ago, I did the architecture tour where they take you on the river in Chicago and you get to see all of the different buildings. And it's great. I do it like once a year. I think it's really fun to do in the summer. What we learned is that the Sears Tower is, it's not super rigid. So when you get up to those high levels of the building, you'll actually feel it sway. So especially on a windy day, which Chicago is windy a lot of the times, you'll feel it kind of sway, which is kind of scary if you're standing all the way up there. But this is actually really good. It's structurally sound, and it's allowing the building to have some adaptability, some flexibility versus it being very rigid. If it was very rigid, it would have more structural issues because we have weather, because it's windy. And I've heard an example of thinking about a spaghetti noodle uncooked. So if a spaghetti noodle uncooked is standing straight up and you were to like flick it in the middle, what would happen? It would break right in half. But if you had a spaghetti noodle that was cooked, it was a little wavy, a little wiggly, but you held it like this at both ends and then did the same thing, knocked it in the middle, it wouldn't break. It wouldn't snap so easily. So you want to have some adaptability and being able to adjust to these issues versus things having to go a certain way. It's okay to have a plan A, but have a plan B, plan C, and know how to navigate when plan A doesn't work and be able to transition into plan B a lot quicker.
Well, if you didn't succeed at the mental health field, I think you would have had a great career in the architecture. I did take that tour, and I did go up to the top of the Sears/Willis Tower, and I stood on that little glass platform, and thankfully I didn't know that it moved back and forth, because I might go back up there and check it out. Number 2, you talked about trusted feedback. Go ahead and hit on that.
As a performer, whatever you're performing in, you want to have people in your corner that you can believe in their feedback. So if you're your only observer, if you're the only person that you take feedback from and you're a perfectionist, you're more than likely going to be pretty hard on yourself. And so you need to have people who you trust that can give you that feedback in the way that is going to be really helpful for you. And I use the word trusted, not just because you need to trust them, but as a reminder that the relationship that you have with the person that's giving you feedback is more important than the feedback itself. As long as you feel as though the relationship between you, maybe it's you and a coach, maybe it's you and a partner, maybe it's you and a friend, maybe it's you and a boss, if that relationship is good and you feel as though it is trusted and it is respected and it's something that you know that is sound, the feedback that you get, whether positive, negative, neutral, in between, you will always be able to take it. And so when working with athletes, I do focus in a lot on the coach-athlete relationship, because I want to make sure that feedback, when it needs to be tough, is able to be accepted because there is a trust between the coach and the athlete.
So I'm going to guess that maybe you didn't have a trusted person through high school and college, and then maybe once you got into that final year of at Baylor, when did you start to find trusted feedback?
For me, it was really when I was in graduate school and I was learning to become a therapist. If you ever become a therapist, the graduate school experience is wild. You are truly the client in a classroom setting. And so you're learning through being vulnerable and through hearing feedback from your professors. And I'm lucky that at Adler, I had really great professors who had not only focused on teaching us and training us how to be really great professionals, but also built relationships with us to where I felt like I could trust what they were saying. And it helped that they probably had the skill set to kind of know what was going on with me without me having to just open up and share from the jump. But that allowed me to lean more into my vulnerability as time went on.
Yeah, good. I love that word, vulnerability and authentic and real. And I just don't think we live in that mode very much, but you and I probably do now because of how well it does for us mentally and emotionally and all that good stuff. Actually, number 3 here, the more I was looking at it, the more I'm thinking, okay, I want to have Patrice tell me something that maybe I don't know. So I do know about imagery and visualization, but I want to hear it from you. What do you have to say about that?
This is a skill that I teach all of my performers because whenever we are able to visualize ourselves through a performance, and when I say that, I mean being able to mentally take ourselves through using our senses. So I would sit someone down, have them close their eyes, and really truly embody the senses of their performance. They're able to feel a little bit more confident as they're about to perform because you are, and this is maybe a little too neuroscience-y, but your brain emulates the same kind of, it's emulating the same thing as if you were doing the performance live. And so if you struggle with taking those steps, the trying new things or doing things for the first time, perhaps it would be helpful for you to sit and kind of visualize yourself doing it first to kind of warm up to then doing it live. So when people say practice makes perfect, this is kind of like that. But again, we want to take the word perfect out and instead be authentic and really embody the senses. So it's okay if you feel nervous. Walk yourself through that. Okay, I'm feeling nervous because I'm feeling butterflies in my stomach as I walk through the arena. But I hear the lights and I hear the sounds and all of that, and really paying attention to how you feel so then we can address it. And we do that through imagery and visualization.
I was just thinking as you were talking about walking through an arena, just that imagery of how you can put those goggles on now and you could put your team into those goggles and say, okay, here's what it's going to look like when we walk into the United Center and walk them in and even go through layups even before a team gets there. But I like the fact that you can go old school and just sit there and think about it in your mind and go through all of those and feel those anxious moments and get those out of the way so that when it's time to get on the floor, you're maybe not as nervous. So
yeah,
that was good stuff. You took me through it visually. So is there something, number 4, is there something you want to do, need to, and you're forced to do? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I'm working with people, they get straight into talking about their performance. I need to score 100 points over the next few games. I need to win MVP. I need to do this, right? So I try to slow us down by asking questions truly to get at the root of what is going on. So, but this can be simplified in thinking about, do you even really want to play this sport? Or is this something you need to do? Do you need to play this sport because it's making you money or because it makes your relationship with your dad better or it makes you feel better about yourself if you play this sport? Or are you forced to do it? Your dad makes you play this sport. You feel forced to perform at work by your boss because they're honing in on something. Just knowing the answer of, do I want to do this? This is something I really enjoy. I love it. I do this for the thrill of it or the fun of it. I need to do this because, at the end of the day, this is my job and I somebody's got to pay the bills, or I'm forced to do this. Somebody is making me do this. It's beyond just a need to of like, this is paying my bills, but I'm forced to do this because someone is forcing me to do this. And by answering those questions, maybe it takes some of that pressure off where the perfectionism is like, it gets to the root of the perfectionism. So for me, some of the things that I was doing, performing at work, relationships, things like that, is a need to, because I felt like I was getting praised if I did it well. And so this is truly fueling me, making me feel good about myself. So if I keep performing well, then I keep getting praised and I feel good about myself. Then what happens when I don't get praised or I don't do well? Then now I'm upset with myself. So just exploring some of these jobs or some of the things that we do, some of the sports that we play, we don't even really want to. We don't even really like it. We don't even really enjoy the work that we're doing, and taking some of those reflection questions to just see what the root of our performance is.
I was just thinking about all of the students over my career of 32 years of teaching and coaching, how this is going on behind the scenes and we don't even know it, with parents and the pressures they're putting on their kids, either for academically or athletically or whatever it happens to be, and how many times kids are doing it because they're forced to go or that they need to. How many kids are out there that want to do it because it's fun and they like to do it. And I, for me, myself, would be in that want to do it. And that's why I fell in love with playing basketball and football. I never needed to do it. And I was never forced to do it. And hence, I think I did all right. The last one, this is the one that I was looking forward to, is environments where you go to turn off. We talked a little bit about it off air, but I'm intrigued by that. So go ahead.
So I mentioned a little bit ago about feeling always on. If you feel as though you're always performing or always need to do things right or always need to do things perfectly, you may feel as though you're always on, which can lead to feeling burnout or depression or just kind of over it, your dips in motivations. I think that it's great for those who are performing or those who are dealing with perfectionism in general to have environments where you get to just hit the off switch. And when I say environments, that can be a place, that could be home, that when I'm home, I don't talk about my performance, I don't talk about the things that I need to do well, or it could be people, or it could be activities. When do you feel as though you could just be yourself? You're not on, you're not trying to perform, you're not trying to get people to like you, you're not trying to do things well, you're not trying to be perfect. You're just able to just be yourself and pay attention to those moments and making sure that those moments are happening regularly, that you have those in your back pocket. If maybe it is, I don't talk about work when I get home because I know that I want to have that off switch, because when I get to work, I'm going to be on. So maybe it is, I'm a perfectionist at work and I'm allowing myself to be a perfectionist at work, but I'm not allowing myself to be a perfectionist at home in my relationships. If you are an athlete, when do you feel as though you can turn off, and how do you feel that? Is it when you come home and you play video games? Is it reading? Is it going for a walk? Or is it calling your mom every Sunday? But just making sure that you have those moments where you're not fully going. I use the example of like a racetrack, right? So a racetrack is this kind of oval. And when you're going down the straights, you're accelerating, you're moving fast. And then as you turn the corner, you have to maybe slow down, maybe your foot's off the gas. And then so you're slowing down. That's not off, that's just a slowing down. But then when you get to the finish line, you need to hit the brake and fully stop. Knowing the difference between those three of when you're accelerating, when you're slowing down, and when you are fully coming to a stop.
You hit on a couple of things that touch near and dear to me. I'm a big race car guy in addition to sports, and I love that analogy of, I think I will use that again too, that little race car analogy. Oh man, what an episode. I think your story will definitely help people or parents, or specifically parents out there that are striving to have their kids be perfect. Maybe you got those kids that are like you, that graduated from high school and move on to college, and then that change of scenery, environments where now they have to go on and being associated with a group or a team like you were, that comes to an end. But for you, maybe the perfectionism didn't come to an end. It was always, like you said, you were always on. So Patrice Whitfield just shared an experience that our listeners can learn from. These 5 things can help you survive and thrive, just like Patrice did through her perfectionism. Adaptability versus rigidity. We talked about that Sears Willis Tower example, which I thought was awesome. Getting some trusted feedback, and that you got that from some of your professors in your grad program. Imagery and visualization and being able to go through something before you have to go through it and maybe get some of those butterflies, reduce them at least. And then is there something, and I love these questions, do you want to do this activity? Do you need to do it? Or are you being forced to do it? I think are all good questions to ask yourself when you're involved in something and maybe thinking you need to be perfect. And then environment. I think this goes well for just about anything that you're doing, is being able to turn off the switch. And you talked about being at home, having the ability to turn that off. As we close with another great episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, are there any final thoughts, Patrice?
No, I'm just grateful to have been invited, and thank you for us getting to chat a little bit.
You will always have a platform to come on here, because not only from your experiences, but I think maybe at some point when you start to get a little more into your therapy and whatnot, you can bring some other things that, hey, Tim, can I come on and talk about this? This has been coming up on a lot of my therapy sessions. Absolutely. You will always have a spot. On our next episode, we will have another amazing guest who will share how they survived and thrived. If you have a story, or if you have a story to share, or you know someone who does, please reach out to me at tdecor@gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through, and with hard work, dedication, and determination, you can survive and thrive. Until next time, take care.